Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
Really, honestly, the number one reason I personally use drawing, or if we want to give it that more conceptual term, visual thinking, biggest reason I sit down and draw and make these kind of drawings is to reduce overwhelm. It really is I'm getting an opportunity to get this stuff out of my body, out of my mind, and on its own surface. And sometimes that is literally all it needs to be. And I think fellow list makers may have that feeling, right? Just that sense, or the folks who love to put things in their planners or always have sticky notes nearby. All of that is that same overarching power of I'm taking stuff that's inside of me that is intangible, I'm getting it out, and I'm making it tangible. That's it.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and today we're going back to the drawing board, so to speak. If you were a child who doodled constantly and ended up drawing more than writing, you're going to love visual thinking as a tool, and you probably do much of it already. Even if you aren't particularly inclined toward art, I think you'll appreciate the approachability of this tool to elevate how you process what's on your mind. I'm excited for you to meet my guest, Brandy Agerbeck. She's a visual thinking pioneer who teaches you how to tackle life's challenges with paper and pen. Drawing is Brandy's number one tool to erase overwhelm, think clearly and critically, and map out the next great accomplishment. In 2016, Brandy published her second book, The Idea Shapers, an approachable and engaging visual thinking guide based on her 2013 TEDx talk, Shape Your Thinking. Today, we talk about how we process information and ideas and make decisions, and how we can use visual thinking to do it in a way that helps our brain. Actually, helps more than our brain, helps our bodies. We talk about what visual thinking is, and it's much more than you realize, how it works to reduce overwhelm and create clarity, who it's for, and how you can try it today. Don't worry, you don't have to take an art class to try it. And if you aren't sure where to start, we've got you covered. It's my goal to keep adding tools to our holistic productivity toolbox, and I'm excited about this one, not just because I like to color. A quick reminder, if you hear my guest mention a book, which Brandy does today, you can find it on the favorites page of the website, positivelyproductive.com/favorites. Also, Brandy mentions some previous episodes, including one with Valerie Friedlander on toxic positivity, and also one about internal boundaries, which is actually the most important boundary that you need as a people pleaser. So I've linked to those episodes in the show notes. Let's join Brandy to talk about visual thinking. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast, Brandy Agerbeck. I am so delighted to chat with you today because this is a fun topic and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm so thankful. I scroll through and listen to the episodes and I'm like, I could have made that one. I could have made that one in the best way. So much of what you choose to invite guests to speak about and your solo episodes are very much resonate with me. So extra excited.
Good. Yay. We've got some good alignment here. And before we dig into the topic du jour, I'd love it if you'd tell us a bit about who you are, who you help. And I think the most important thing would be what makes you light up.
As Lisa said, I'm Brandy Agerbeck. I get to do my two favorite things for a living, which is thinking and drawing and combining those two. Happily, I was that kid who drew all the time. Nobody told me I couldn't. I always joke that in school, I turned every project into a craft project, every assignment into a craft project, and very thankful I had teachers that let me do that. And then fell into some very weird work called graphic facilitation, basically where you're thinking and drawing and listening for a group of people as they're meeting. And for about the past 10 years or so, now my great joy, what absolutely lights me up, is getting to teach everyone visual thinking skills.
And that's what we're digging into today. But this graphic facilitation, that sounds so intriguing to me. And would you call that, I mean, at least the way it sounds to me, like the bridge between your standard note taking and bringing it to life visually? Is that what it is?
Yes, it's just sort of put it into a little bit of context. If I'm working as a graphic facilitator, I'm at a live meeting in a room with humans. Virtual can work too, but the joy is really being in the room with a group of people working. And I put a giant sheet of paper up on the wall and I map out their conversation as they're talking. So definitely more diagrammatic and more spatial than what most of us think of as meeting notes, but definitely this opportunity to help the group see and touch their work, to get to see their voice, their input, and how it fits in with other people's voice and ideas and input all in the same drawing.
That's like taking my love for Venn diagrams and like
Yes.
and like jumping so much further. What I'd love to know, and this is the best place to kick off the crux of our conversation here, is if there's any kind of overlap to what you teach now in terms of visual thinking. So, what is visual thinking, Brandy?
It's an imperfect term because it really is visual thinking, visual feeling, visual sensing, and it's also visual and it's spatial and it's hands-on and kinesthetic. So I just blew up those two words, but fundamentally the way I look at it is anytime we get to tackle life's challenges with paper and pen, the idea is you're making a drawing. And because you're making a drawing versus, a classic standard to-do list or text, when we're making a drawing, we can go anywhere we want to on that piece of paper. So it gives us a lot more flexibility to get stuff out and move it around within this particular kind of drawing. And it's definitely a different kind of drawing. I'm not drawing your portrait, Lisa, to look like Lisa. It's very diagrammatic. How do these different pieces fit together? Absolutely all the sort of Venn diagram love. And as we're making that drawing, we're making countless choices. So you're thinking, what is the idea or the feeling or the thought I want to capture? Where should it go on the page? Is it a certain color or a certain size? All of those choices we're making meaning. So we're noticing the connections that are coming together or patterns emerging. And I like to think about these particular kind of drawings, and they can absolutely be messy. They're actually better when they're messy. These kind of drawings are the first step or the next step in making great things happen. Lots of making our ideas, thoughts, and feelings tangible.
Okay, so my first thoughts, and this is on behalf of you Enneagram ones out there. You talk about making it messy, making it imperfect. I'm immediately thinking this feels like so much space and opportunity, which is awesome, but also scary.
Totally.
Are there rules? Are there no rules? Or the rules are that there are no rules? Is this like Fight Club? Like, what's the deal?
I think you're right on. I say that, you look at that blank sheet of paper, and on one hand, it can be anything, like this wonderful sense of like possibility, openness, expansiveness. And the other side of that coin is this piece of paper could be anything. So, what the heck do I want to, make this piece of paper? I'm very much the person who knows how to follow the rules. And in some ways, I'm very much a rule follower. And then other times it's absolutely, like turning an assignment into a craft project. So I will never say rules. One of the things I love about teaching visual thinking is this is going to sound like kind of weird semantics, but there are definitely choices that work better or don't work as well. You can choose certain colors to go together, and some of those colors are going to feel harmonious. And there is some sort of color theory guidance or rules around how colors work together, but there isn't any rule that says in this particular kind of drawing or for this particular kind of task, I need to use this particular color. Even though there's the wonderful limitless possibilities on the piece of paper, there's very learnable choices. And I always love that when I get to teach, it isn't just about the how to do this, but the why this works better or this maybe works not as well.
And is it when we say this works maybe better or not as well, are we adding in that prepositional phrase that you and I have in common and that we've really bonded over, which is the for you part? Is that?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So maybe this rule idea, and it doesn't have to be rules or whatever, or guidelines or boundaries or whatever that you need. Because I know from a productivity standpoint that overwhelm so often comes from that sort of blank page analysis paralysis kind of, situation. So if we give ourselves parameters or guidelines of some sort that work for us, like I know for me, I would like to use some color theory or complementary colors if I'm thinking that I want to be, like, my intention going in would be to be energized. I might want to use complementary colors or things like that, right?
Yep.
Or maybe I'm just using favorite colors for the things I love and not so favorite colors for the things that I'm like trying to shift out of. Is that the right idea? Where can we, actually, before we get into like the where can we start and this sort of the examples of how to's, you mentioned before, and I want to make sure that we expand upon that. You're drawing, you're making choices, the choices have meaning, and then ultimately you're trying to discover patterns in there. So there is an A to Z kind of thing. Is that what's happening in terms of how it's working? And then I also want to make sure we address who it might work best for. And maybe conversely, too, if someone's listening, where maybe it's not the best, or you can love it and be like, no, it's for everyone. But I would really appreciate your hot take on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First, I wanted to piggyback on how you used a magic word of overwhelm, how overwhelming things can be. To truly back it up back to that idea of making a drawing, and no matter how messy it is, whether you've chosen colors that are complementary or not, any of that, really honestly, the number one reason I personally use drawing, or if we want to give it that more conceptual term, visual thinking, biggest reason I sit down and draw and make these kind of drawings is to reduce overwhelm. It really is I'm getting an opportunity to get this stuff out of my body, out of my mind, and on its own surface. And sometimes that is literally all it needs to be. And I think fellow list makers may have that feeling, right? Just that sense, or the folks who love to put things in their planners or always have sticky notes nearby. All of that is that same overarching power of I'm taking stuff that's inside of me that is intangible, I'm getting it out, and I'm making it tangible. That's it.
So important, that whole brain dump idea. And of course, I work in that, or mind sweep, or whatever you want to call it, a la David Allen, getting things done. And this idea of when it's in your brain, and, that's not what it's intended for us to be carrying around these ideas, these worries, these perceptions, all of it. It's meant for processing and creating, innovating. So the more that we can declutter, the better. The first thing I'm thinking of in terms of this as an option, and the whole point of this is that we have another great tool, right, in our toolbox.
Precisely.
And I'm immediately thinking, now I am a list maker. I'm a wordsmith, English major from way back. They definitely give me life, but that is not the case for everyone. And also too, when you're really overwhelmed and you need to get stuff out, sometimes you need to do it quickly. Would going for an image, because our minds work so much with imagery, maybe be a faster way to get it out?
It could be, absolutely could be. And truly, especially I'm not surprisingly a past studio art major, a printmaker.
Nobody's shocked.
I know. So I found about the most concrete hands-on thing I could do at a liberal arts college.
My second child is definitely going to be following in your footsteps for sure.
Excellent. Excellent. It's a good path. I recommend it. A couple things, and then I'll answer. I want to come back to, it certainly could be an image. If that is what comes fast and easily to somebody, go for it. Maybe if you were, as a past English major, you might have lots and lots and lots of practice writing full sentences, for example. And maybe it's kind of shifting that to distilling your language, making more concise phrases only for speed, right? Just to get stuff down faster. So really, absolutely, this is about having another tool that lets you work to your strengths. And we're talking about the list making and using words. I always like to say, I like to blame Gutenberg for inventing the printing press, because text is fantastic for distributing detailed information, lining up those letters on a letterpress, printing out a lot of copies of it. And like you said with David Allen, I'm completely with you. I don't think we as humans are meant to try to hold on to as much as we hold on. And of course, what we're expected to be aware of, and the more and more people we're kind of in our orbits, our nervous systems just aren't built for it, truly. When I flip that and think about what helps us process, that's a huge reason why I love this shift from text to something that's more spatial, that can absolutely be both text and images and lines and shapes and squiggles and whatever works, is that it helps us process information a lot better. If you're looking at text, the shape of text is, it definitely where we live in the world and the way our writing system is to really take information in from left to right and top to bottom, right? There's a shape. But when we shift, and number one, the first thing I recommend people doing is one, don't use lined paper. Two, turn that paper 90 degrees. Like even that is shifting our thinking to be in landscape mode, to be more spatial. And when we do that, an idea can go anywhere. So I could put down one idea on the page, the next one comes up, and one of my first choices is this similar and close to what I just wrote or drew? Or does it need to be on a different part of the page, right? We're able to work 360 degrees on that sheet of paper, and we can fit one idea into another idea. Within that drawing, there might be a list because we do want a sequence, but that sheet of paper has all those possibilities and lets us do so much more. I like to say, when is the last time you solved a problem in a straight line?
It's so true. It reminds me of that meme where you talk about like success and we think it's this graph, right? That starts below and then it's like this straight arrow up and it's like, nope. And it's like this squiggly line that overlaps on itself and comes back and then breaks up and then goes up and then down. Yeah. Yeah. There's literally, I mean, other than I guess the things that we have created as humans, like time and calendars, everything else that we experience is so not linear.
Yes. And truly, the second thing I most often use visual thinking for myself is trying to make time tangible.
Ooh.
Yeah. I have very strong spatial skills. Time is far more abstract to me than any of this other stuff. So, and I think to your question, I love this question about who is it for? And I think that generally speaking, folks who are listening to us right now, they're likely going to be one of three types of folks, maybe four types of folks. First is the folks who are like, well, of course, this all makes perfect sense. This is the way I'm wired. And you may already be using these kind of skills. If you ever want to learn how to strengthen those skills or learn about more choices you have, fantastic. You are ready. I should say some of the folks are like, yes, this is how I'm wired and this is how I already work. The second is, this is how I'm already wired and I've struggled against being raised in families, schooled in, school systems, educational systems, and working in workplaces that fought against working this way. So for some folks, it is, holy heck, not only is this how I work, this is what I need just because I've been fighting against this, right? And then the third type, I'd say, are the folks who don't have necessarily strong feelings about that this resonates. It might just be more like you said, oh, this sounds like an interesting tool I could use. So I might be used to tackling a challenge with, words, writing a list. What if I now put each of those different items on this list on a sticky note and I started sorting them out, right? That just gives us a new type of information. And then lastly are the folks who I would say are far more likely to be the ones who just aren't wired to be more visual, to be more spatial. I love this woman named Linda Silverman. She studied thousands and thousands of kids. And she saw that as learners, they tended to either be auditory sequential, which would be our top, that fourth kind of folks. The auditory sequential thinkers, much more comfortable listening to lecture, much more detail oriented and thinking in words. And then the visual spatial kids are the type where you ask them to show their work and they can't because they don't learn step by step. They learn all at once. And instead of seeing the details, they're always seeing those connections between the details. In her research, she found that 63% of us lean towards visual spatial or are strongly visual spatial.
Wow.
Right? Compared to 37%, which is very much what schools are built for. and most workplaces work towards. So there is a whole heck of a lot of us who this is the way we naturally work. And absolutely welcome back. Welcome back to this way of making meaning for ourselves.
Right. And you were mentioning, like, if someone isn't necessarily visual, I think this could be an interesting way to open up and to practice that, because as we get into more of the how of it, I think it's important to know, and it's something I actually keep forgetting, and I love that you bring it up, is that visual thinking is not like you have to draw a picture. No, it's visualizing in many different ways, including, like, if I feel like plastering a whiteboard with bubble letters, it's totally copacetic, and it's
Absolutely.
like, do it. So that's such a good reminder of that. To your point, we talk a lot here about being multi-passionate, being neurodiverse. I use the term the best I can because it's an encompassing idea of saying we all think differently.
Yes.
And I think the more that we keep saying that and keep accepting that, most importantly for ourselves.
Absolutely.
I process things differently from you, and I lean towards certain things, even certain visuals. And I think this is so cool because you can see this at play in other ways that we can process or plan. Vision boarding is a great example, and where we can pull in different elements, we can touch. It's like different parts of our brain, if you will, and allow it. But the big thing, I should say, that you said that I really like, the auditory highlight here, like this idea of some thinkers being like, okay, it wasn't like piece by piece by piece. It wasn't that linear. It was like, I just all at once, because we're paying attention to the connectivity. And I'm going to go ahead and lump myself in there. And I think it's part of my superpowers as a coach, is that you can tell me your story and tell me all the things you're doing and where you're frustrated with productivity and what's going on with your family and what matters to you and what kinds of habits you used, but then they felt like they failed miserably, but it wasn't really you. And I can be like, okay, so here's what's affecting that. This is what you tried. This is what's going on. This is how it connects to your family of origin. Like,
Exactly.
Going through this entire connection, and it, in many cases, it feels simultaneous. Then for the multi-passionates, they're not just my people, but the innovators, where it's like constantly like, ooh, this makes me think of that. And that connects to this. So again, it's connectivity. And it's also innovation of, it's not just making the connections, but connecting to the potential for the new. And I'm thinking about like people in whiteboard sessions, innovating and, doing cool stuff. And invariably, there aren't only words. It's not just a list. There's arrows pointing in different directions and and circles and colors and things. So is that kind of where we could go potentially with visual thinking?
You're absolutely right on. Yes. A big giant bubble letter, yes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I can envision it now. The bubble letter with the little,
Right?
yeah. Brandy with the bubble letter right overhead. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And her awesome glasses that match her shirt, by the way, which just makes the color coordination just makes me so happy. Okay. So
I'm one of the matchy peeps. Yep.
I love that. I love that for you. I love that about you. So I mentioned vision boarding, and the other thing I wanted to bring up was like the idea of mind mapping. That's used a lot. And I think in a great make the connections, let things branch out and network. Could we go next to how we would compare and contrast the two and how we can think about those in that context?
Absolutely. Tony Buzan created mind mapping. He wrote many books. And I think of, it's not the most healthy phrase. I think about mind mapping as kind of a gateway drug because he's got such very specific resources teaching that particular shape. So truly, I would say that mind mapping is a particular shape under this giant umbrella of visual thinking. If it's something you do, mostly if you already are a mind mapper, mostly I just want to say you could break out of that form.
Love it.
You might find some frustration where you're like, I know what my hub is, but this particular, spoke off of this hub really needs to go over here. And you're breaking kind of the rules of mind mapping. So truly it's a shape. So by all means, please keep mind mapping. And if you feel like the shape isn't working, absolutely break the shape and do other stuff.
I love that so much. And of course, in a meta quest for making connections, which I can't help myself, and I do, in my line of work, when we're talking about decluttering and making changes and making space for what matters, right? I can remember back in the day, Marie Kondo was huge because she had this concept, which was, does it spark joy? And that's great. It's one filter, though.
Yes.
And so it worked for many, many people. And they were like, this is the best thing ever. And then the other people it didn't exactly work for, or only partially worked for, would come to me and be like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, that was one filter. It's
Yes.
not only about sparking joy, there's so much more that we need to consider in terms of what belongs in our space and what doesn't. So that immediately makes me think of it. That's a great way to describe it. So that could be a place to start if you want to. It could be something that maybe you've already done or tried. And if you're like, I tried it and I don't know, maybe this next step is saying, well, it's that, but so much more.
Yes.
That might be better. And I have tried it a little bit. It didn't quite click. So I'm excited to be like, yeah, that's only one portion of this.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you using the example of Marie Kondo and sparking joy, because I think it loops back to something you said earlier, which was something around, and part of it's because I get to see you while we're recording, is that sense of the brain, and you were sort of scrunching up your shoulders and kind of this like feeling, sort of physical feeling posture. And a huge reason why this is so popular is that it is about our entire bodies. And that might be mind blowing for those of us who think we can think our way out of any situation and have very fast brains and have lovely, awesome brains that love to problem solve and do all sorts of things. What is fantastic, one, let's just get the right brain, left brain thing and kick it out of the room. That's not actually how our brains work. When I was listening to your episode about internal boundaries, absolutely thinking about how so often our internal identities are things like, well, I can't draw. Oh, I'm not a visual thinker. Or somebody saying, well, I am a visual thinker, which means I'll never be a writer. Right. And we can be so many different things. And unfortunately, the I'm left brain or I'm right brain, people have basically put themselves in their own buckets. And we cut off a lot of possibility and a lot of potential tools that we could use. So definitely I say that not only is this the entire brain, but it's also a huge reason why I make physical drawings and don't really work with digital tools is when I'm making a physical drawing, I feel like it's helping me pull all the brainiac stuff back into my body. And not only am I thinking, I'm also feeling. And it might be like I'm trying to solve what seems like a very thinky problem, but I also have some emotions around it. And I
Mm.
might also have that gut reaction, that intuitive sense. And I might also have physical pain. Like I'm working through something and I'm just feeling like that part of my neck is getting tense again. Or I might have that moment where I get the goosebumps, I get the chills. So what's happening is we are thinking and we're feeling and we're sensing and we're feeling the feeling emotions and physical sensations. All these things are happening and it's all information. I love when you were talking to Valerie Friedlander about toxic positivity. At one point, she said, with toxic positivity, only certain emotions are allowable, right? Like we got to shove all the not so sunny stuff out of the way. That is information. That's
Yes.
very valuable information. And we know if we try to shove that stuff out of the way, our body's going to remind us. You know,
Oh,
it's going
yeah.
to show up.
It's coming out some way.
Exactly. So I think, so often when people come to me and want to learn from me, it is very much because they are the super fast brained folks who think a certain kind of way, who are big picture, which, making all those connections, which you perfectly described in your coaching work. And all of that is fantastic. And then at some point working together, they start noticing the feely parts and how much part of this practice is not just getting thoughts and ideas out, but again, it also being a safe space to also capture your feelings and also being a discipline, a practice where we're having much more of a conversation with our inner critic than the lecture from the inner critic, right? So it's like the inner critic might say, well, you can't do this. And then you start making a drawing that shows you you can do that thing. And so now it's like, I just told you so. inner critic. You said I couldn't do this, but I wrote it down and I drew it and it's right here.
You're opening yourself up to possibilities. And,
Exactly.
when you use the word processing, which I love, that means like working through something. We don't process something in a compartmentalized way where I'm only going to think about it, but the rest of my body's going to be fine and totally relaxed. Nope. Even when we're sharing a story of something that frustrated us, like sometimes I'll be like, whoa, hey, hang on. Breathe through it, Lisa, because we feel it. And our subconscious, here's the sort of that serves us and doesn't. I don't want to use the good and bad. Those
Mhm.
phrases don't necessarily serve us, but it's like well, what's happening when kind of thing. And so when we have a memory of something, our body will feel it. Our minds, our subconscious don't necessarily know it's not happening right now.
Absolutely.
I'm not a trauma expert here, but this is my understanding of it. But then in another great way, like when I help coach gratitude and we express something that we appreciate or something that's happened to us. And when we have a positive memory that we are, embracing and savoring, right? Savoring and celebrating, we get to experience that again, even though it happened before. So, I mean, that's a wonderful and very positive and healing way that happens. But either way, we're processing it and it's going to be in all the places. And I'm thinking of really interesting potential and thinking of kids, all right? Because I think they teach us so much where when they're like, I got a color, and then they're like really angry about something, and then it's like lots of like really saturated color, and they're like taking the marker, the crayon, and like down to the nub, like they're just like,
Yes.
right. But that's so, I'm thinking how therapeutic that is. I'm thinking how the whole, coloring for adults, so to speak. I don't even
Hmm.
consider myself an adult, so that doesn't apply. But, like how meditative and therapeutic that is. So I feel like that can come into play. So it's not only that we're thinking about, oh, what are we going to do? And, what are my next steps in business? But also I'm coloring and it's therapeutic and it's fun. I definitely use my whiteboard that way. I have a lot of different color dry erase markers. Just going to point that out. So, but yeah, I see all this potential. And again, all these connections to how we process and heal. And I love that you brought up Valerie. She's one of my favorite people. And yeah, one of her guidelines is, okay, we have this inner critic. We don't need to bash or fight against it. As a matter of fact, like many things probably in the Marvel universe, the more you fight it, the more you give it power. So instead, you befriend it. And it's kind of like how you disarm someone when they do something really weird and you're like, or mean even. And you're like, are you okay?
Hmm. Yep.
What? It's like one of my favorite. Are you okay? So I think all of this connects so beautifully. I'm loving this. Okay. As we start to wrap things up, let's maybe give some either examples or guidelines or scopes as to the next steps or next couple of steps. I know I have a whiteboard and lots of markers, but it doesn't have to be that. You mentioned before, and I want to bring it back up, plain piece of paper, preferably not with lines, right? Because we're
Yes.
trying to stay open. Turn it to landscape again, because we're trying to 360 this sucker. I'm going to
You
make that a
got it.
verb now, right? Okay. Anything that we have on hand, pencils, pens, markers, doesn't matter.
Whatever tools you love. And I love, that example of the kiddo, scribbling something out, right? Like there is that tactility, there is that hands-on, that like there is an expression even in the scribble. So if you just need to scribble something out, do it. We have a virtual event every October called Envision, and the first thing we do is actually draw a scribble and annotate it. And that's all I'll say, but it might be something that gets you curious about joining us.
Ooh.
But it's an exercise of transition into the event of, getting this scribble out as a transition point. One of the really simple things, yes, absolutely, we want a blank sheet of paper. Part of this is we're just breaking habits. How many pieces of paper around you are lined and how many don't have lines on them. You might have to go out and, get some blank paper. And then that turning 90 degrees is breaking another pattern we're used to seeing. The next thing, if you want to do something super duper simple, is just pick, I would say, one black pen, crayon, marker, whatever you want to use, and one that's a lighter color. And you can think about this as a guideline. I won't say it's a rule, but notice if you're used to taking a lot of notes and sketching something out, try this. All the stuff that's words, write it in black. And all the stuff that are connectors or shapes or highlight, make it in that lighter color. And even using those two colors, you're now creating a couple layers of information on that page. So an arrow pointing from one idea to another that might be orange is not kind of duking it out with the words on the page. Hopefully this makes sense as people are listening.
Yeah, no, I like that. I can see two purposes here. One is that visually it makes the distinction that you have
Yes.
these words that represent these concepts or something that you wanted to do or a project or a task or an idea or whatever, and you write those out. And then how they connect or which might be a priority or however you're trying to work through it and organize it, you're using that secondary color as a distinction. But the other thing, and of course, this is the productivity coach in me and the data collecting coach in me, immediately thinks if you try this out and then look, how much more of one color do you have of the other? And that may also show you where you are inclined. And that's neither good nor bad. It's, again, just data, it's information, and it's all good, but it shows you how you might like to work. And then you can kind of expand from there. I think that's a wonderful next step. The only other thing I would want to clarify is I know the sky is the limit, but I'd love to bring the scope down a little so that the whole point of the exercise in doing this, of reducing overwhelm, we don't want to create overwhelm by saying you could do it for anything. So what are some, for instances, or examples of something that you might want to process or figure out that you would use this for?
But Lisa, you can use it for anything.
Dang it, Brandy!
I know. And truly,
I do get that.
Yes. I like to talk about, because of that, because it is so limitless, I sort of define 5 types of visual thinkers, which isn't about putting anyone in a bucket. It's just helping it feel a little more concrete.
Okay. I like that.
And so here's 5 categories, and just, notice which ones resonate more, resonate less. You may already be using lists in one of these or making mind maps or getting the scribbles out. But the first one is, I have some fun names. The first type are the life shapers and action takers. And this is just the productivity stuff. It truly is blowing up the list, making it spatial, getting to group things together, noticing if you're color coding, are a whole bunch of things orange, right? I know we love a good color coding.
Oh, yeah, we do. You're talking my language.
The second type are the communication shapers and message makers. And this is anytime you're writing or speaking or figuring out what your message is. And it's great because it's funny when you talked about the process being a squiggle instead of a straight, a line from the lower left to the upper right. Think about if folks are listening and they write or they speak or they teach and you start with a template, like you go into some program and you start with a template where the line goes from the lower left to the upper right. And you're like, okay, I have to make my message fit into this shape now. An awesome thing about a blank sheet of paper is you can just start getting all those different ideas out and moving them around. And you might discover, oh, that's not the shape at all. And both of my books started out on index cards, truly just one idea per index card. I learned it in 6th grade. I then forgot about it for far too long. And then I came back to it and now I teach it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Our third type, these are my super favorites. And I think very much the big picture problem solvers, the mess wranglers and complexity tacklers. And we're the folks who are trying to find clarity within complexity, where something's gnarly, something's really trying to figure it out. And when somebody says, keep it simple, stupid, it's like, but it's not simple. I can't make this simple, right? There's just too many interdependencies. There's too many moving parts. So this really is just that, very much that sense of mapping out. What are the pieces? How do they fit together? The fourth are knowledge seekers and lifelong learners. That's teaching and learning. Like for me, we're all lifelong learners. So it's all the same. And, going beyond flashcards. Flashcards are fantastic. That's index card that are absolutely our friends. But when we can truly take what we've learned and map it out and have new understanding for what we've just learned. And the last one are conversation shapers and change catalyzers. And that's the kind of folks who do the weird work I mentioned at the top of the hour, graphic facilitation. Anytime somebody is using these tools to help someone else, an individual or a group, feel understood. Just the wonderful thing of folks feeling listened to, seeing how their idea fits in with other people's ideas. And that hopefully gives folks just a little more edges around what we could use this for.
These, I think, can give a good jumping off point. So, what I would encourage you to do today is think about these categories and pick one that like jumps out at you like this is something I've been wanting to do or I'm inclined to do that just feels good and simple and maybe like a natural next step, and then try visual thinking connected to that in some way. I love that. It's a great jumping off point, and then from there, sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
That is a fantastic place for us to wrap up. And before we go into the bonus round, the fun rapid wrap up, let us know where we can find you online, Brandy.
Thank you for asking. And this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm very thankful for it. My site is loosetooth.com.
Love that.
Doesn't describe what I do, but people remember it, and I've had it for 20 plus years. So you can always find me at loosetooth.com. Biggest thing, truly, if anyone's curious, every month I have a free Q&A. I call it Drawing as a Verb because we're making very process-focused drawings. And you'll definitely hear those 5 types again, but definitely a space to, I get to teach a couple models, those big picture context setters, and I absolutely welcome your questions. And not sure our timing for this particular episode, but we always do have this wonderful 3 days together called Envision. So that is our annual virtual event that folks are absolutely welcome to.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to have this information in the show notes so that you can find everything that Brandy mentioned. And now, are you ready for this rapid wrap up?
Absolutely.
I knew you would be. All right, this is a fill in the blank. And you can draw if you want, but make sure to mention it because we are recording.
Exactly.
A song that lifts my spirits and makes me dance is
Coming Home, Baby. It could be the instrumental by Quincy Jones, but I also really like the Mel Torme version. It's definitely a shoulder shimmy kind of song.
Ooh, maybe I'll put both in the Positively Living dance playlist. It's on
Ooh.
Spotify. It might be volume 3 or 4 at this point because, oh, Mel, what a voice.
Yes.
Okay, how about a quote or a mantra that inspires me that I love to share?
I had another one chosen, but I have to go back to this old favorite of mine, which is from a Danish mathematician slash designer slash poet named Piet Hein. He would write these brilliantly simple short poems and had wonderful simple line drawings that were called grooks. So that's another rabbit hole folks can go down is looking up Piet Hein. My favorite grook short poem is problems worthy of attack prove their worth by hitting back.
Ooh.
Right?
All right, I'm going to just sit with that one for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, that one packs a punch, speaking of attacking. Okay, how about a resource? It could be a book or app, really anything, not even related to this topic, but just in general, that has made my life better. Is?
One of the top things I recommend is Rick Carson's book, Taming Your Gremlin. It's been in print for over 30 years for very good reason. And a gem from this is he talks about how your mind at any given moment can only be in one of 3 places: the sensations in your body, the world around you, or the theater of the mind, which I feel I always have to say exactly that way.
Yeah.
So for us thinky people who spend a lot of time in the theater of our mind, it can be a really wonderful resource for thinking about all these different aspects of ourselves. And if you do have those gremlins that get in your way, that inner critic that's especially loud, highly recommend Rick Carson's book.
Ooh, I feel like there's a conversation about grounding that would be very connected to this. That sounds awesome. And I will make sure to have that book on the favorites page of the website. So last, but definitely not least, what are you grateful for today, Brandy?
What folks can't see right now, one, I need to rest my neck because I've been nodding loudly as Lisa's been talking since we are so much on the same wavelength. But I actually have these giant ear protection. They're the sort of thing somebody wears when they're on the tarmac, these giant ear protector headphone thingies. I am grateful for these and how much they have helped my physical and mental self, just getting to control how much sound comes into this being. Because I'm definitely one of those big old sponges for everything around me. So I'm very grateful anytime I need to put on my ear protection and I get to really focus in this case, to get to talk to Lisa and you, anyone's listening.
There are so many amazing tools that can help us live better. And I would definitely say that visual thinking is one of them. So speaking of gratitude, I am grateful for you, grateful that we connected and have bonded this way, and for you sharing your wisdom and your creativity and your connectivity to all of these amazing concepts, and just for sharing your light in this world, shining it so brightly and then sharing it with us today. I appreciate you, Brandy.
An absolute pleasure. I'm so thankful for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.